Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know what time you decided to stop by. Welcome to Confessions. I'm your host, Coach Nikki G. I'm not your typical coach. I'm here to help you build your emotional, mental, and spiritual muscles. On my podcast, I like to talk about situations that a lot of us like to sweep under the rug, but it's only so much that you can sweep under the rug before it starts to come out. Today's topic is so common in a lot of our lives. We may know family members, or we may have even seen it on television. One show that came to mind, I thought about the 1970s show Good Times. And the show was about a black family raising their children and the struggles that they endured. However, it was a character on there named Ned the Wino. And of course, Ned the Wino was always drinking or drunk, and it seemed to be normalized. It's those types of addictions that a lot of us seem to normalize in our families. We may know someone, it may be a family member, or it may be you yourself. At some point, we make excuses. Oh, that's Uncle so-and-so. He just drunk. He just doing this. But you have to ask yourself, why is this person drinking so much? To the point that they're basically killing themselves. What would cause a person to do that? And a lot of us would say, oh, well, it's just a lack of self-control, but it's deeper than that. That person is suffering from, could be unhealed trauma. And that's what I want to do today. I want to tie in the unhealed trauma with addictions or having no coping skills. Now, with addiction, it can sneak up on you silently, taking over your life. The efforts of addiction and unhealed trauma moves through every aspect of your life, your relationships, and your sense of self. So today, addiction is the thing that a lot of us sweep under the rug and we try to normalize it. Now, when we talk about addictions, a lot of us like to think of drugs or alcohol, but there are other addictions that we tend to normalize as well. That would be behavioral addictions. These addictions or behaviors are at the expense of your well-being. They interfere with your work, family, and all your relationships. For example, gambling. We may have a family member, we may know someone that will gamble to their detriment. That is, they will be financially strapped. Maybe they didn't pay their rent, their mortgage, the lights are off. They don't care. They just want to go gamble because they're simply trying to not deal with some kind of trauma or something's going on with them that they're willing to just gamble off all their money. That's not normal. That's an addiction. Food. We know someone that is an emotional eater. You're looking at one now, or a recovered emotional eater. When we don't know how to handle our emotions, food was our go-to. It's an addiction. You eat the food and you just eat, and for that brief moment, it gives you a little bit of relief, but it's really messing with your health. Now we can move on to, it's just several: food, sex, shopping, gambling. Those are behavioral addictions. Now, what causes addictions? I found a few causes that I want to tell you guys about. The first one is growing up in an environment where the type of behavior is accepted. Maybe you seen someone in your family gambling, so you decided that's what I would do too. Or maybe you seen someone drinking, or whatever the behavior is, it's accepted, so you just, you pick it up. Once again, unhealed trauma from your past. It could have been from your childhood. Something happened to you, you haven't healed from it, so you pick up an addiction as a coping mechanism. Physical, sexual abuse, early exposure to drugs. Cigarettes. I recall someone telling me that how they started smoking was the fact that their father used to ask them to go to the stove and light a cigarette. So eventually he started, puffing on a cigarette, and then as an adult, he just became a smoker. So he had an early exposure to those cigarettes, and that became an addiction for him. Stress, no coping skills. Once again, if you're not taught how to deal with your emotions, you will cope with them the best way you can. And for a lot of us, it turns into some type of addiction. Now, how will you know the difference between an addiction and maybe some would say an addiction and, oh, I just go for fun? It's a big difference. When the behavior is becoming increasingly dependent as a way to cope with your emotions and for you to function. You continue the behavior despite attempts to stop. You can't stop. And I'll go back to the gambling. Some people, they cannot control that gambling. I've seen people lose their homes. I've seen people live in places with no water, no lights. They lost everything to go to the casino to put their money in a machine. Why? They probably was avoiding some kind of trauma or something going on. It was some kind of underlying factor in there besides the fact of them getting the feeling of going to the casino. Neglecting or avoiding work, school, or family to engage in the behavior. You know, you might invite Aunt so-and-so over for Christmas or whatnot, and she said, no, I'm going to the casino. Avoidance. That means she's putting that behavior before the things that she needs to do, or family or whatever. Denying, minimizing, or hiding the full truth about the behavior. All of those are warning signs of a behavioral addiction or substance addiction. It could be either or. Now, let me give you an example of behavior addictions. I already talked about the food. The food is a way for some people to reduce their stress and to lower their anxiety. Well, at least that's what you're thinking at the time. But my trainer told me a long time ago, she said food is something that you can control. You can't control what goes on in the situation, but with the food, you can control it, so you eat it. So to me, it was a combination of all of that. The control, it reduces my stress because at the time while I'm eating, I'm not thinking about, whatever it is I'm avoiding. Shopping. When I read about shopping, I thought about hoarders. If you ever watched the episode of Hoarders, these people will buy stuff and it was just, their whole house would just be a mess. But they would have like a psychologist come in and come to find out it's some kind of emotion, some kind of trauma that they suffered as a child that they hadn't dealt with. So they turned to shopping. And once again, it's an avoidance, a coping mechanism for depression, or it helps you avoid those negative moods. At one time, I was a shopper. I knew I had a problem when I went in my closet one day and had multiple shirts of the same. I'm like, what? So I knew then I had a problem. So it's very important that if you know someone that's struggling with an addiction, that you try to look at them from a different perspective to try to understand. So maybe you could possibly help them if they want to help themselves. That's the key. The person has to want to help themselves. After this podcast, I'm hoping that we will stop normalizing family members or friends that we know are addicted to any type of addiction. Alcohol, drugs, shopping, gambling. It's time we hold these people accountable. Because once we hold these people accountable for their actions, we are breaking the generational curse of sweeping things under the rug and not dealing with it. It's time for a change. How much longer can we go through generation after generation watching all of these different things happen? How much longer can you condone the behavior of your family members simply because they are drunk with alcohol? It comes a time where you got to say no. Now, drugs, primary cause for most people, unhealed trauma, childhood neglect, and abuse. If you watch my podcast, you will see several confessions of people that have suffered childhood abuse and did not take the time to heal from it. And they will tell how their life was altered because of it. How do you heal from these different addictions? These are possible things you can do. Another stigma. I want to talk about is the thing of not getting help. You have to seek professional help from a licensed drug and alcohol counselor if that's your addiction. Or seek professional help from anybody that can help you. It's okay. At some point we got to stop worrying about what someone else says and just begin to take the steps to heal. You could go to a support group such as AAA. Something simply as finding a stress reduction program. I would say that would be more in line with behavioral addictions, not drug and alcohol. If you have a drug and alcohol problem or you know someone, they would have to have professional help. Now I want to go back and talk about environmental causes or environmental things that could cause a person to pick up an addiction. Things that we may have been around as a child or we may be doing ourselves. It's time to stop. Okay, so once again, someone experienced abuse or neglect during childhood, peer pressure as a teenager, intense stress levels. How do you deal with your stress? That's important, because if you don't have any kind of coping mechanism, you will pick up probably some type of addiction. Parents that favor their behavior. If you got that parent that's out there trying to be friends with their children, that's not going to work. You have to hold people accountable for their actions. You can't, smoke weed with your kids and then expect for them not to do it. Or you don't know which way that's going to go. You have to be an example for your children. And association. In my following podcast, this lady talked about how she spent 30 years in her addiction. And it started out as hanging out with people that was drinking and smoking. And then it progressed to cocaine. So all of these things, this lady, she experienced them all and went 30 years without getting any kind of help. And today I hope that this stops with this podcast. It's time to go get some help. It's time to break these generational curses of letting our family members and people that we associate with just drink and do drugs, and we don't say anything. It's time to stop sweeping that under the rug and find out if you can why. And initially the people may turn it down, but at some point they are going to want to seek help. Now I want to build your spiritual muscle. And today I want to read from Matthew 11:28 and 29. Come to me, all of you who are tired from carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke and put it on you and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in spirit, and you will find rest. How many of you are tired of carrying these heavy loads? Mental, physical, sexual abuse, alcohol, drug addictions. Those are all heavy loads to carry. And at some point you are going to be tired. Now, in the next verse, it says, take my yoke. What is a yoke? A yoke is made of wood, it's hand carved, and it was made to fit the neck and shoulders of animals to prevent pain or discomfort. It is also associated with submission. You could be yoked to a person or thing. Here is my question to you. What are you yoked to? Are you yoked to addiction, drugs, alcohol? Are you yoked to toxic relationships? Whatever you're yoked to, you should change that and be yoked to God. Because once you become yoked with God, that's where you're going to find your peace. That's where you'll find your way out. And once you come out together, you're going to come out together. He's going to give you your steps. He's going to tell you which direction to go. He's going to lead you out. That is your way out of your addiction, to be yoked with God. Today, I want to leave you with peace, love, and light. And if you're that person out there that's looking for some help, support group, go to internalevolutions.com and book a discovery session, and we will talk. Once again, Talk to you again next week.